I'm wiring for digital command control on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and if you'd like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, then be sure and subscribe below and click that little bell icon so you can catch future videos. One aspect of model railroading that strikes fear in a lot of people's hearts is electronics and wiring, especially when it comes to DCC wiring of your layout. Well, I can understand why electronics can be frightening to a lot of people, but the truth is that wiring your layout for digital command control is actually extremely easy. Now, this is a subject that has a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ways that people do specific detailed things. In fact, I've done a couple videos on this subject before, and I've really gotten a lot of criticism for the way I do certain things. So I know that opening up this conversation today is kind of like talking about religion, politics, or whose mother has the best cooking. But I'm going to share with you nonetheless how I wire my layout for digital command control. Now, I would really like to hear in the comment section down below how you wire your layout in a way that may be different from the way I wire mine. Now, if your idea is just to come and tell me how I do mine wrong, I wouldn't bother to leave that comment. But if you'd like to tell us how you do yours and some details about what you think is really good or important about how you do your wiring for DCC, then I hope you'll share it with us in the comments down below, and I look forward to the conversation that we can have down there. Now, before we get to the wiring, I want to remind you about my 10,000 subscriber contest. It's going to be coming to a close probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. Now, if you're not aware of my contest, you can check out the details about how you can enter in the video in this link right now. But you better hurry and get entered, because as soon as I hit 10,000 subscribers, the contest comes to an end. And I'm only about 50 subscribers away as of the recording of this video, so you better get in soon. Also, I want to share with you some bonus links that are not related to model railroading, but I think many of you will enjoy in the closing of this video. So I hope you'll watch all the way to the end, check out that closing, some things I want to share with you there and that I think you'll enjoy. Now we're going to go over to my workbench, and I'm going to show you how I wire my layout for digital command control. So I'm going to show you here how I wire my layout for DCC. I know it's a little different from the way some people do, but this has worked very well for me for a long time, and so this is the process that I use. Now, I'm showing you this example just on a scrap board that I had in my garage today, but what I'm showing you here is exactly what I do underneath the layout. And what I've screwed to this board, typically I screw to either the inside of the back sill or sometimes along the sides of one of the stringers. Now, I start off with, in this case, I've got two short terminal strips, two pole terminal strips. What I'm going to do today, you also could do with one 4-pole terminal strip like this, and you would just keep the two sides, these two poles, separate from these two poles to do exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm using the two-pole ones just because it's going to be a little easier to keep things separated as I show you the process, but you definitely could use a single 4-pole, probably save a dollar or two on your terminal strips. Now, I'm going to start off by running my main bus lines. And I've got just some scrap wire here. I'm going to show you just how I do this, but just with some scraps. For my bus wires, I use 12-gauge stranded wire. I've had some people, say 12 gauge is, too heavy. You don't need that much. Depending on how long a run you have, the longer run of your line, of your electrical line, the heavier the wire, the less electrical drop-off you're going to get over that long run. So I would just rather be safe than sorry. So on my bus wire, my main bus, I use 12 gauge. I use stranded wire on this because as you're needing to make turns and things, a 12-gauge solid wire, very hard to bend, and you always run the possibility of kinking and breaking it. It's just a lot easier to work with a stranded wire for 12-gauge for the bus. I do use some solid wire a little later on that you'll see. And I use this bus wire, and then I have a set of terminal strips like this for every electrical block along my layout. So if you're talking about short prevention or short protection, or in my case, I refer to it as short management blocks. For every block, I'll have a set of terminal strips. So within that block, I'm going to have so much track that's going to be insulated from the track on each end of it. And for each one of those blocks, I'll have a set of terminal strips. If you are using power districts, you would probably do something similar to this, although that process would be a little different. So that's a subject for another video. But as I come into a particular short management district, I have a pair of terminal strips, and so I'm going to bring my red electrical bus into one side of a power of a terminal strip, and then I'm going to connect my my bus that's continuing directly across from it out the other side of that same terminal on that terminal strip. And so that gives me a solid connection, and so this is literally my bus wire just running straight through the block. I do the exact same thing on the black side. Now, I don't refer to these as positive and negative because with DCC, as we're talking about here, it's more of a alternating current kind of an application. So it's not really truly positive and negative. And with DCC, it doesn't matter which side is red and which side is black. What does matter is that you keep the particular pole from your DCC system. One side is always red, the other side is always black, and you keep those consistent as they go across your layout. I do my short management using 1156 taillight bulbs, like you'd use in the taillight of your car or pickup or whatever. I did a whole video on how these work and how I wire them up, and I'll provide a link to that video in a card in the corner right up here right now. And you can check that out if you haven't already seen it. Now, I know I've gotten a lot of arguments about that. You do need to be careful about this. This is not something you want to do where you would want to leave your trains running and go off and leave them. Because if you get a short with the 1156 bulb, these will help manage the current of the short. They will light up and show you what district the short is in. They will keep the rest of your layout from shutting down. It does not completely break or eliminate current like a breaker would. It manages the current. And so as long as you are with your layout and you're running with your train as you should be, this is a great way to protect or to manage shorts on your layout, short circuits. Again, I've gotten a lot of argument about that, and there definitely are situations in which you can cause problems doing that if you left it unattended and you left a shorted out through an 1156 bulb for a long period of time. That's why I would say just don't leave your layout running and unattended. That's just not good practice. Anyway, I take one of these 1156 bulbs and I run 18 gauge wire. Now remember, I used 12 gauge wire for my bus. Now I'm running what I would call the sub bus, and for that I use 18 gauge wire. And so for this 1156 bulb, I use 18 gauge wire, and I solder a short piece of wire to each of the terminals on the light bulb, one of those being on the end of the bulb and one being on the side of the bulb. And you can see here exactly how I do that. And then on the end of those little pigtails, I put some crimp spade connectors, and I end up with something that looks just like this. Again, we've got them wire soldered to each pole, one on the end, one on the side. Got my spade connectors here. And then here I have already screwed on a little vinyl wire clamp. Those look like this. You can buy these at about any hardware store. They're made to where you can bundle some wires inside of here and put one screw through these two holes and clamp it down tight. But what I do, as you can see here, is I don't put a screw through both holes. I put a screw just through the one hole, as you see on the board here. Leave the other one kind of floating. Because what that does with these little, I believe these are 1/2 inch or maybe 3/8 inch clamps, an 1156 bulb will literally just snap right into that, and it holds it perfectly in place. So with my bulb soldered, I want to make sure I'm not touching the screw, which I've got a good space there, so I don't have an issue with that. And with that soldered up, I'm going to take, and it doesn't matter which end is which, but I'm going to take one end of these terminal spade connectors from the 1156 bulb, and I want to connect it in with the same pole that I had here for my main. So literally, I'm drawing power directly off of the main bus into this 1156 connector, 1156 bulb, I mean. So right off the main bus, into the 1156 bulb, coming out of the other pole of the 1156 bulb, I'm going to go into this other terminal, keeping all the red on this terminal. Now you see the power is flowing from the bus through the bulb back into this terminal. These terminals are not connected directly at all, only through the bulb. That's what's going to provide our short management. And again, for more information about that, I would refer you to that earlier video. Now on the black wire side, I don't need a bulb but on one wire. I only want a bulb on one side. So on the black wire side, and normally I would do this before I put these wires in, but I wanted to show that to you. I use these little jumpers. You can get these jumpers for your terminal connectors, and they will connect your terminals together. You just slide it down over two terminals, and now these are electrically connected to each other. And I'll put my bus wire back in. By the way, these items that I am using to do this, the 1156 bulbs, the terminal strips, the jumpers, all of this stuff is available online. Many of these things are available on Amazon, and I'm going to provide links to those that are available on Amazon in the description down below. I do need to let you know those are affiliate links. So if you click those links, I do get a commission for those. Those that aren't available on Amazon, I'm still going to link from allelectronics.com. That is where I buy a lot of my electronic stuff. A great online supplier. I am not an affiliate of All Electronics. I get nothing for anything that you would purchase through them. I just think they're a great supplier, and you can buy all of this stuff through allelectronics.com. Now I'm going to go, remember, I'm working with a sub bus here that's going to go just to this short management district. And so I've got some pieces of 18 gauge wire just for that purpose. And so my red wire, again, I'm going to connect to this side. This is the side that is away from the main bus, connected through that 1156 light bulb. And just going to screw a wire in there, and that's my sub bus. And I'm going to do the same on the black side. Again, these are just all connected here, so it doesn't really matter where I screw that in there. And what I'll do is I'll run this wire, this 18 gauge sub bus, through the district, and my feeders will connect into this 18 gauge wire. On the ends of these wires, a lot of times you can just leave them open as long as they're not going to hit anything. For safety's sake, you probably want to put maybe a piece of electrical tape over it, or you could screw a wire nut over the end of it, or something just to protect from something shorting on the end of the wire there. And now I'm ready to connect feeders. Now for feeders, I always use 22 gauge solid wire. All the rest of this is stranded. For feeders, I use solid wire, and the reason for that is it's much easier to solder the wire to the rail with solid wire. That's a personal preference of mine, and I'm going to do another video coming up just in the next couple of weeks about doing feeders and installing feeders, and I'll show you exactly why I like the solid wire whenever I do that video. Usually, I connect my feeders into this sub bus using IDC, insulation displacement connectors, or more commonly known as suitcase connectors. Now, I know a lot of people hate suitcase connectors. I have never once had one fail on a model railroad, and if one does fail, all I got to do is go through, clip that wire off, and connect it in through another one. It's really not a big deal. And a lot of people prefer a solid permanent connection, and so I'm going to show you how to do that today. I'm using an automatic wire stripper here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my 18 gauge wire right in the middle of the wire, and I'm just going to strip back a little of the wire. What that's going to do is it's going to cut it, and it's just going to push that insulation back a little ways. Now, I personally, when I do this, after you solder this wires together, you can put electrical tape on it. I like to use shrink tubing, and with that little bit of wire stripped, I'm ready to connect in my feeder. Now this feeder would be coming down from the track, of course, so that it would be, you know, taking power to the track. But here at this wire, I'm just going to come down and I'm going to just wrap it 2, 3, 4 times, whatever, right around my sub bus, just like that. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to solder that thing. I'm going to put a little bit of flux on it. And just for the sake of consistency, while I'm at this, I'm going to go ahead and do both sides as if I were doing both feeders to a particular piece of track. Whenever I'm going to be soldering, I always like to, you know, prepare several soldering joints and then solder them all at once. I'm going to go ahead and put some flux on this joint on the red wire. I didn't do that yet. And now I'm ready to solder those. Now what I typically will do is I will get some solder on my soldering iron. And so then as soon as the wire is hot enough, it's going to flow into that joint. And then I just like to go back and forth over that joint a little bit. I'm going to kind of hit both sides. Make sure it gets hot enough for the solder to flow down into the joint and then back off of it. Same way with my other joint here. Just going to hold it there, and it doesn't take long for that copper wire to get hot, but you do want to make sure that it gets hot so that it flows down into the joint. You don't want the solder to just sit on the top of the joint. That won't make a good joint. So you want to stay on there long enough to get the solder to flow down into the joint itself. Now that I've got those in place, I'm going to bend this down just a little bit here. Be careful because it's still warm. And then I'm going to slide my heat shrink tubing down over the entire joint. Then I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to use this part of the iron up here that's not as hot. I don't want to use the tip. I'm going to use this. I'm just going to rub it back and forth over that. It is hot. And you can see that tubing is beginning to shrink up right down to the insulation and over that joint. And that's going to seal that in there really, really well. Do the same on this one. And there we have our first set of feeders. And then we would, of course, this bus, you know, the sub bus would be longer. In this case, it would go down through the power management district, and I would just connect more feeders all along it. So that's how I do the wiring on mine. People sometimes hear me talk about an 18 gauge sub bus, and they seem a little confused. They don't know what I'm talking about, because I know not everybody does this. And again, this goes the way I'm doing it, specifically with using the 1156 bulbs. But you could do this same thing even if you didn't use the 1156 bulbs. If you used some other sort of a breaker, you can still use the same process coming out of the breaker using a sub bus. The thing I like about that is I like being able to connect my feeders into this bus and not have to break the insulation on my actual main bus and worry about any electrical connectivity issues there. So that's how I do the wiring on my layout. And again, we'll come back in that video in a couple of weeks and I'll show you how I actually install the feeders onto the track and get that part of the process done. So that's how I wire my layout for digital command control and for short management. I've had great luck with this process with the 1156 bulbs, with the sub-bus system that I use. I've used it for over 20 years and I've never had a problem with the wiring. This process works really well for me, and I think it'll work really well for many of you as well, so you may want to give it a try. Now, I promised you in the introduction that I had some bonus information for you, not related to model railroading, but some things that I wanted to share that I think some of you would be interested in. First, many of you know that I just recently returned from a trip to Puerto Rico where I led a team that was doing some recovery work, rebuilding roofs on homes after Hurricane Maria last year. Well, I'd like to share with you some information about that trip if you're interested, and I've made a video on my personal channel, and I'm going to put a link to it in this card right here. I hope you'll go check it out. I think that you'll find it interesting, and I hope you'll enjoy the video. I also want to let you know that my daughter is a talented young actress and an aspiring poet, and she has her own YouTube channel that I would love for you to go check out. If you're into contemporary poetry, slam poetry, or you know someone that is, I think that you'll enjoy her original poetry over at her channel. I'm going to include a link to it in a card up here as well. I hope you'll check it out, and if you do, leave her a comment and tell her that her dad sent you. Well, if you enjoyed this video about DCC wiring, here's some more videos about DCC and layout wiring that I know you'll find helpful and enjoyable as well. I hope you'll check those out. Also, be sure and check out the description down below this video where you'll find links to my Amazon page, my Amazon picks of the week, where I'm going to include many of those products that I used in the wiring process today. You'll also find links to my Patreon page and ways that you can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. I hope you'll check that out. Well, be sure and join me again next Tuesday as I'll be bringing you another great model railroad video, and I look forward to seeing you then. Lizzie?